Welcome, Renee. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us today on the potty.
Oh, thank you. I'm so blessed to be here. Such a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah, it's very... I've been following your journey on social media for some time now, and I felt such a pull to everything that you speak to. And it 100% aligns with Empower Her. So it was a no-brainer for me to reach out to you. So very grateful to have you here today.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess for the listeners today, we're really going to be touching on embodiment, self-pleasure, everything around, I guess, really stepping into being the empowered woman, and also with Renee sharing parts of her story, how she got into the work that she's doing now, because I think there's always a story to the reason why we get into, empowering women or, embodying the way that we desire and things like that. So I can't wait to hear your story, parts of your story. But essentially, I have been tossing up whether or not to ask you these questions, but I'm not sure if this has ever crossed your mind, but I'm kind of getting to the terms with, I hate asking the question, how are you? Because I feel like it's just, everyone's always going to answer, good, thanks, how are you?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, I think it's important to ask, are you okay? And is there anything that I can do to help you? But I was pondering on, how can I ask people in a different way that's more expansive and we can connect on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And the listeners can really get an understanding of who you are as a person too. So my first question for you really is, what was your highlight of the week, it being a Friday?
Oh, I love that. I've actually had such a beautiful week.
Yeah.
A highlight of my week, I've had a beautiful friend move in with me with her 2 boys, another single mama, and it was really unexpected, but she gave me a phone call, told me her situation. I was like, why are you not coming to my house right now? My door is always open. And she was like, I was going to ask you if I could, but I didn't know. And I was like, of course. So that's just been such a beautiful, unexpected blessing that has felt so abundant, that sense of sisterhood. And that's a big reason why I do what I do.
So it felt very aligned for you.
Very aligned.
Oh, that's so exciting for you.
Yeah.
And then my next question, which is a little bit deeper, is what has been the hardest thing out of your week this week that has challenged you or pushed you?
I'm trying to remember what I even did this week.
It
kind of gets like that. I think mum brain is something that never dissipates.
Great.
I think the hardest thing, something that's very recurring is our children are our biggest teachers, and I have a 3-year-old son who challenges me the most. So I think the hardest thing is navigating how to hold his big emotions when I'm maybe overtired or I'm trying to work from home as a single stay-at-home mum who also works from home. So, yeah, I think just navigating the intensity of the emotions that come with being a mum.
I love what you're saying, and I feel like so many women would relate to that. Not just recently this morning I jumped off a call with my best friend and she said exactly the same thing. I think he's a similar age, and she was like, sometimes I just don't know how to hold it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. I think it's such a beautiful way to kind of get insight on what's happening for people, because you never really know what's happening behind closed doors, and people can so quickly just be like, yep, I'm good. When really there's so much more going on.
Yeah.
So I like to ask that question to open it up if people feel comfortable to share parts
I love
of their
that.
story.
I also love asking, how are you feeling today?
Yeah.
Because it kind of brings that, you actually have to be intentional and today.
Yeah, you're like, oh,
what did I do today?
Let me think about that.
Yeah.
I think anything to make people think, rather than just your...
Just automated.
Yeah. Autopilot responses.
Yeah.
So as we get into this podcast, I'd love to understand how you got into the work that you're doing. So I know you're doing a bit of content creation that comes with embodiment, women empowerment. What was your main driver to getting to where you are right now?
Well, I was in my previous relationship when I was 17. So that's when we had first started dating. And at 18, we decided that we wanted to have a baby. Well, I did. And he was a bit like, I don't really know. And then we spoke about it and we consciously conceived our first son. And so going through pregnancy, it was like one of the most expansive, beautiful times of my life. But being 18, I was also really ashamed because if I told people that I planned the pregnancy, I felt like I'd be looked at as if I was dumb. And if I told people it was an accident, it's like I'd be looked at as if I was dumb, because it's just like, oh, typical. So that was something that really transformed me, because I had to learn to continue to do what I wanted to do anyway, which is typically what I do in life anyway. But I had to also hold that discomfort of not everybody's going to understand. And then comparing that to my second son, I was 22, I think, 23 when I got pregnant with him, and in a completely different space in life, and, was far more outwardly excited, and embodied in that pregnancy. So birth was the thing that initiated me, because I didn't have maidenhood. I went from teenagehood to motherhood. And so before becoming a mum, and this is why I say a lot of my content, like I'm in the season of becoming the woman I never became before I became a teen mum, because I never experienced adulthood as a single woman until now. And I am so grateful for that journey that I've had. Like, it was such a beautiful, I'm so glad that I became a mum at 19. I had him, and it taught me so many things about myself. But birth was such a beautiful initiation, because I knew how I wanted to birth my son, but I didn't expect it to be as euphoric and beautiful as it actually was. We're conditioned to believe that birth is a medical event, or it's something that we need to fear. And so I was expecting the worst, but I knew that I wanted a natural physiological birth. When I birthed him and had a beautiful experience, I was like, why is nobody talking about birth? Why is everybody saying birth is like extremely traumatic? And although traumatic births do exist, I knew that there was a disconnect between how much women trusted themselves and the birth that they had. And so that started to ponder. I moved over to Australia when I was 20, and my son was 1, and I didn't even know what a birth doula was at that time. And I saw a course and I was like, I'm going to go do that. Became a birth doula. Obviously within that space, it's so much about embodiment and self-connection. And when I would work with women, my number one advice would be, or if I could give advice to the whole world around birth, it would be get to know yourself. Because there is not one perfect place to birth, one perfect way to birth. It's so dependent on your whole life's journey, and even how you were birthed, how your mother birthed you. So that then unfolded into, I need to work with women in preconception, because that self-trust and that birth prep needs to happen even before you conceive your baby. At the same time, I was also doing intuitive readings, which then I realized I started connecting with people's spirit babies, all so deeply interconnected. And then I started to facilitate women's circles, and then that turned into women's retreats, and then that turned into one-on-one mentorship. And so I just allowed my own intuition to guide me into spaces that felt good to work in. And I guess that's kind of what led me to embody more of the work that I do now. And obviously recently, at the beginning of this year, my 10-year relationship ended, and so I'm a single woman for the first time in my life. And although that was extremely heartbreaking, it was such a soul-shattering experience. I am so grateful, because I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, and it's truly helped me become the woman that I am today. And the depth that I had to journey through in that, I was only able to gain that wisdom through moving through it to then support other women in similar positions.
Wow.
Long story short.
I was like, every time, like the whole time you were speaking then, I was like nodding my head. I was like, wow. And I guess like pure alignment really has gotten you to where you are, and listening to your gut, your intuition, and I guess your purpose. And I think it's such important work that you're doing, especially when you were speaking around, working with women before conceiving. And I think that's something that's not, I'm probably not doing the research right now, because I'm not looking at having kids at the moment, but it's something that you don't hear enough, like the positive talk around birth.
Yeah.
And this is something that I was speaking to a good friend of mine as well. She recently gave birth, and it was a home birth, and it was a beautiful experience. And she recovered really well. She had a glow to her straight away. And I just feel like it's always been the medical side that I've heard. It's always been the dangers of pregnancy, rather than really shifting the perspective. And like, yes, there are births that are traumatic. And I think it's very important to acknowledge those, but also to know that I think, state of mind, environment plays a big factor into how you bring baby into the world. So that's really beautiful. I love that. I guess you touched on it briefly at the end there. It's like you've just come out of a 10-year relationship to the father of your boys. And I guess my question to you is, like, where are you at right now? Like, what's your journey look like for the listeners? It's like your story has got you to where you are right now.
Yeah.
And what is in front of you, and what are you looking forward to essentially as you grow, like, within this space?
It kind of feels like I can't believe that it's already almost the end of the year.
Oh, I know.
So it's, my intention when my relationship ended, and, there was a bit of back and forth and like, is this going to work? And inevitably, I think the best thing was for that separation to happen, because we both needed to grow in our own ways. That I was able to see doorways that you can't see when you've got your blinders on. And, it's like with any relationship or connection that you have, or friendships, it's like the people that you hang around are the people that you become, and sometimes you just need a moment of solitude. And that scared the fuck out of me. Like, I
think it would scare a lot of people.
Yeah, and, I'd never been alone as an adult. I'd never, although I feel like I'm a pretty independent woman, even within my relationship, I always had that person, and I noticed how anxiously attached I was, and I noticed how I would always outsource my sense of safety. And yes, we can have men there to protect and provide and support, and that's a very important part of life, I believe, but to actually show myself, I can feel whole within myself in any position that I've been put in. And so now I'm like, it's given more purpose to this season of motherhood. It's given more purpose to my work and how inspired I am by other women, because that was what held me through my breakup, was women and sisterhood and my mother, and so that healed a lot for me in allowing my mother to mother me through something that was really heartbreaking. And I'm really excited for next year. I'm really excited for the opportunities that are opening. And, I had to trust myself logically as I was moving through that breakup. My mind was saying, keep going back, like, keep trying to make it work, And it's not like it was an extremely toxic situation or anything like that. We literally had been together since we were teenagers and started to grow apart. And my body, on the other hand, was like, if you keep doing this to yourself, you're going to become extremely unwell. Like I had eczema as a child, and it started to come back, funnily enough, on my ring finger, which had never happened before, and I'm such a big believer that our body is in constant communication with us, and my intuition, although it had, I feel like, been suppressed because I was in survival mode for a few years, it started to come back, and it was like, girl, you need to sit your ass down and think about what you're doing. I was like, okay, maybe I should, and so it kind of got to the point of true surrender, and then things started to shift. And once you take those rose-colored glasses off and you see how things start to change, you can't deny it. So it kind of started to build momentum in that way.
Wow, I feel like that's really special. Thank you for sharing. I feel like so many women can or would be able to relate to that. And I know far too well, working with women as a relationship coach, is I'm scared to leave. I want to leave, but I'm scared to leave.
Yeah.
And my first question always is, what is your body telling you?
Yeah.
How has your health been?
Yeah.
How are you feeling internally? Do we have tummy pains? Are we feeling nauseous? Because the body is always speaking. And the fact that you had the rash on your ring finger,
and
I got goosebumps when you said that.
It's crazy because, as well, our body is often in constant communication, but when you have either been in survival mode for a very long time or it's become normal, you don't actually notice it until it's not there anymore. So something is like, I would always get migraines like once a month, once every few months. Now I haven't had it all year. And that's got nothing to do with anybody else, but it's just the fact that my body truly feels safer now, emotionally and mentally. I feel far more clear. So yeah, it's been such a big journey, but I'm very grateful for the challenges that have come come through that because of the wisdom that, you know, we get to then embody and integrate.
Yeah, that's very powerful and very important for women to hear, because I think initially it is scary, but to actually hear you say, like, I feel a lot safer, even though that decision at the time felt scary to leave and not to be with him. And, you know, I can't even imagine considering two other people in that, you know, babies really. So there would be so much uncertainty and safety not there. So for people to hear that you have so much safety right now, and especially within womanhood, and even bringing your friend into your space is really beautiful.
Well, something that I feel like is really important, just to quickly touch on this, is, you know, at the time I was literally living on my mum's couch with my two sons. I didn't have any savings. I didn't have any professional work experience. I went from, you know, high school to motherhood. I literally was like, I didn't have anything that I could physically use to sustain myself. And so I let my mum hold me and navigated it in that way. And I wanted to share that because I think a lot of people say, well, like, oh, I can't leave because of X, Y, and Z. And in my dynamic, I didn't leave. You know, my partner left. And again, that was the blessing of that disconnect. But it doesn't actually matter what position you're in. Like, I had to get so honest with myself. And I was like, I've got basically fucking nothing. I had like $2 in my bank account, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get resourceful. Like, we have so many resources available to us. We have so many opportunities that will come to us if we open our eyes and our arms. And so I literally went on to ChatGPT, never used it before. Before my breakup, I didn't even know what it was. And I was like, after it became my best friend. And I was like, okay, ChatGPT, this is my situation. This is how much time I have in a day. At that time, I was studying my chiropractic degree as well. And so I was like, how can I utilize my skill set and my experiences to earn an income whilst also making sure I have time to go to the gym and look after my kids and da-da-da-da. And it came through with like this whole template. And I didn't necessarily use that template, but it gave me an insight as to how I could become so much more resourceful with what I did have. And that, along with the beautiful people that were in my life, like propelled me forward. Yeah.
Wow, AI saving.
Yeah.
Creating our
and the
lives.
community, it's like who you surround yourself with, you know, after such a big life transition will completely change the trajectory in which you move.
I speak to that quite strongly. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's really beautiful. Let's go on to the topic embodiment, which I know that you speak to a lot. Let's start off with something quite simple so that people can understand what it really means for you. So what does embodiment, I guess, mean for you?
Yeah. So embodiment is the act of being in your body. Like, if we break down the word embody, it's the awareness that we can bring our energy down. It's being grounded. If we think of our energetic body, you know, outside of our physical body, when we're always in our head, when we're overthinking, when we feel insecure, when we feel ungrounded, our energy is above us. And so to bring that energy down into our body is the act of embodiment. But in order to do that, we actually need to feel safe. So if we've had experiences in our life that made us feel like our body wasn't a safe place to be, then we're going to disconnect. We're going to dissociate. And this could be through birth trauma, sexual trauma, you know, whatever the experience may be. And when we start to create that safety in the body, whether you work with someone professionally, whether you allow yourself to go into that discomfort, it allows you to create this relationship with your body, and it feels more cohesive, and that's that integration. So I see embodiment as a very important part, especially for women who are deciding I'm going to level up, or deciding I'm going to move differently, or deciding I'm going to build a bigger, better life for myself. Because when you're in that embodiment, you can do it from the space of logic and just kind of keep moving. But at some point, your energetic body's going to be here, but your physical body's going to be here, and it's not sustainable. So when we bring that embodiment, and as women, we can access that through pleasure and self-connection, it allows for everything to be integrated. So it's kind of like, you know, if you were to go to the gym and not perform an exercise properly, but you do the whole set, you're probably not going to gain muscle. Or if you're not eating properly, you're probably not going to gain muscle or strength. It's the same thing when we try to do the physical act of either building a business or starting a project, but not actually being authentic and integrated in what you're doing. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully explained. I literally could not have said it better. So when women feel unsafe and they may be making a life decision that feels really uncertain, how can they start to live more embodied? Like you've mentioned a few things as you were explaining there, but what would you suggest to women to start embodying more of like who they are? How do we start?
For me, it's connection to my intuition, and that honestly looks like being so committed to yourself. So it's like, yeah, we can listen to our body and our emotions and our mood, and that's really important, but sometimes we need to kick up the arse and we need a little bit of discipline. So it's finding that balance between, I know I need to do this thing right now. You know, for me, for example, in the beginning of this year, it was like, I'm just going to have a little bit less sleep every single night. And I know that's not great for my hormonal balance. I know that's not great for my physical body. But to get me through this season and propel me forward, that's something that I'm willing to sacrifice. And so we have to be okay with acknowledging the reality of where we're at. You know, not every woman has, you know, maybe if you're a single mum, maybe you don't have support. I understand that. Or maybe, you know, you don't have access to certain connections that you need. And I'm a big believer that miracles happen, and you can definitely call that in the more aligned you become. But the more that we trust our intuition, it starts to become clear. I think if we dismiss our intuition, it's kind of like a friend calling out to you saying, hey, this is some advice I would give you, and you keep ignoring their advice, eventually they're not going to give you any more advice or any more support because you're not listening. So it's, yeah, I kind of see it in a relationship like that.
Beautiful. So what's one, I guess, like, not like a task, but practice that you have done in your journey that's helped you become more embodied and present and aware?
My outlet, like, I love physical sports. I feel like I grew up as like a bit of a tomboy, and so I love Muay Thai. In high school, I played, you know, rugby sevens, just for a bit of fun. Didn't even really know the rules, but I just loved jumping on the field.
I love that.
And so for me, and this is why I say it's so important to get to know yourself, for me, it is that physical exertion and really pushing myself physically, because I know that grows myself mentally. For some people, it might be more of that stillness and that slowness that might still feel like a bit of an edge and a bit of a stretch, but it helps them to feel more connected. Also just connection to my pleasure, something that I've been able to reclaim, especially in the past few years, acknowledging the pleasure that I desire to feel in my body, both in a sensual, sexual aspect, but also in the mundane. You know, I love to romanticize my life. I love to light candles at night. I love to, you know, apply face oils in the sun in the morning. And it's like, that isn't even a ritual. It's just a part of what I do.
I love that. And I feel like a lot of women may forget to pour back into themselves in that way, even if you are married, in relationships, coming out of divorce, a new fling. Like we do tend, the first thing that we do is we forget ourselves, especially if there's kids in the picture. So to bring in something simple as lighting a candle, popping some music on, turning all the lights off, having a dance around the house, and just connecting back into body is so underrated.
And I think it's about thinking of the standard of life we want. You know, like I look at my boys and I'm like, what kind of standard of life do I want to uphold for them? Like, what childhood do I want them to look back on? I want them to see me as a mother who made dinner with candles and jazz music playing, you know, or and they start to replicate that, and they go out and they pick me flowers and, you know, little things like that. It's like, because that is our normal, and when as a mother, you know, we acknowledge that we are the heartbeat of the home and everything gets to be centered around that, it's a given that we allow ourselves to be that space of pleasure and connectedness, and it brings a sense of security because we feel secure in our own body in those moments.
Yeah, the heartbeat of the home. I love that. And how can we be a strong heartbeat of the home when we don't pour back into ourselves? You know, we're pouring from, what's that, like an empty cup?
Yeah.
And hoping for the best. So I think this is your reminder, if you are listening to this podcast, to start embodying self-love, or you know, even if it is just lighting a candle, pouring a glass of wine, having a cup of tea. I challenge you to implement something this week that romanticizes your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go into talking about like returning to love. This is something that when we jumped on a call at the start of the week, you started to speak to. I think you mentioned you're reading a book around.
I was reading a book called A Return to Love. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's an amazing book.
And as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I love that. Like returning to love. I guess my question for you around this topic is, what has returning to love meant for you in this season?
The first thing that comes to me is to like allow my ego to step aside. Returning to love for me has really been about continuing to soften and like rein it in when I'm feeling emotional or dysregulated. When, often if we're in a relationship, it's easy to share that dysregulation or put it onto somebody else. And I noticed how I'd been doing that for years. And so not having anyone there to do that to, I was like, oh shit, I've got to figure this out on my own. And like it was a very humbling experience. It felt scary and I felt lonely sometimes, or very empty, like I was trying to source some sort of external stimulus to numb me out for a bit, whether I'm like just need to go for a drive or like scroll on my phone. So the return to love has been a softening, allowing my heart to stay open even when I felt like it needed to close and harden. And that's because I understand that if we close from one aspect of ourselves or one area of life, we're going to close in all aspects. So if I want the blessings, if I want the opportunities, if I want the growth, I have to stay open. And, this book that I have, I'm not much of a reader, but when I have a book, I just grab the book and I'm like, okay, I'm going to let my intuition guide me, and I'll just open it. And every time I opened it to a passage or a page that just hit me and I was like, oh, okay, co-parenting dynamics can be extremely challenging. And so that was the biggest teacher for me, my co-parenting dynamic, to return to love. And I feel like now we're in a space where the co-parenting is actually really beautiful. And it's like, oh my God, it actually paid off. Like I'm actually really proud of myself for how I held myself through those moments, because it was very challenging.
That's so funny that you started talking about co-parenting, because my next question to you was, how do you balance loving yourself while navigating co-parenting?
I think you have to love yourself whilst navigating co-parenting. And you have to, again, like it's, in my experience, it's like I just need to set the standard. And, the other person is either going to step up or step away. And when I acknowledged that within myself, I feel like I just ignited a fire that I was like, oh, I cannot be fucked with. Yeah. Like, and not even by, the father of my children, just by anything that's thrown towards me. Like I can, in Te Reo Māori, in the Māori language, we say, I'm po, or like I'm neutral. I'm allowing myself to be in that space of neutrality. And so, even in, I guess, a very practical sense, I wouldn't communicate if I was emotionally heightened, because what's the point? Like there is literally no point other than the fact that I want to be heard. It's like we start acting like toddlers. So it's like, oh, okay, that was my biggest takeaway. Only communicate when you feel emotionally balanced, which then meant I had to actually love myself through that discomfort or through those emotions to then actually get there. So, yeah, I think especially for anybody who's navigating co-parenting dynamics, obviously there's such an array of dynamics, but that self-love is, I think, crucial, for your children, because our children are so connected to us, especially in terms of like nervous system regulation. And so especially if we're the primary caregiver, that's like our number one focus.
I love what you said about regulation and not responding in the heat of the moment. I think that's something that people take a while to click onto, and you kind of become in this cycle of repeating, lashing out at each other, because it's like, I want to be heard, but you're not hearing me. And the most powerful thing to do in that case is to say nothing.
Yeah.
And to be with it. So what did you do to love yourself through that? You mentioned you had to do some things to love yourself through, being with that emotion.
Honestly, just have a big cry. Go to the gym, like call in my sisterhood, I might share with them like what pissed me off, but I won't necessarily send it in a text. So I had to lean on the people that I did have, but I also had to allow myself to move that energy through me.
Yeah. So movement sounds like it's a big one
It
to
is.
self-love and,
Yeah.
and connecting.
Yeah.
And I think for women as well, that comes back to self-love, and everything that we're speaking about is actually prioritizing movement.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee the moment that you start moving your body, because like frequencies, right? Energy, like it's all being stored somewhere in the body, even if like you getting the rash on your finger.
Yeah.
Like the body is always talking, it's always speaking, and I think it's so important to move your body. So again, I challenge our listeners to incorporate some form of movement. And you mentioned that training, like
Yeah.
going to the gym is your
Yeah,
form
that's
of
like,
movement.
that's my outlet. But also, you know, this is not necessarily movement, but it is, I guess, movement of energy is self-pleasure. And that's something that I know, especially in single motherhood, a lot of women feel a lot of shame around and a lot of disconnect. And it's like, actually, that sexual energy is so pure, and we can learn to access, you know, the pleasure portals in our body that's only going to support us in that self-connection and self-regulation. And it's not something that we should feel ashamed of or deprive ourselves from, especially in single motherhood. If you have to go in your room and lock the door and put a movie on for your kids, like, go do the damn thing. Like, it's actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and it's so important. And again, that's another way of connecting to yourself and your pleasures and what you like and how you like it. And I think it's also something that we shut off to society because it's kind of frowned upon to speak about is self-pleasure, whatever that looks like, whether it's sexually or something that, you know, lighting a candle.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's not spoken about enough, and that's the topic that I'd love to speak to now is pleasure and, you know, self-connection.
Yeah.
So what are some small ways, like we've just touched on it really, but kind of let's get really deep into it. So what are some ways we can reconnect to pleasure and joy after loss and emotional heaviness in relationships? Because that, I feel like for me in past relationships, when you have your split, maybe like 6 months after I started to feel like, okay, I can start to have, you know, intimacy, whether it was with someone else or with myself, and really connecting back to my body. But for women that are moving through a hard time, how can they really bring that pleasure in, whether it's intimately or an activity?
I'll bring through an analogy. Again, I relate a lot of my work back to birth because it's all so related, is, you know, if we see pain and pleasure on a spectrum, and let's say the analogy that I use for birth is like, if you're birthing a baby and you need to take yourself off that scale because of either survival or your choice, it might look like getting an epidural, right? So when you receive an epidural, obviously that impacts, you know, your hormonal balance, and, you know, it can impact then how you experience your birth, but it could also provide great relief. You know, so every woman has a different experience with it. Either way, it's taking you off that scale. So because of that, you're not necessarily experiencing that deep discomfort, but it's likely that you're not going to experience that emotional and hormonal high that you can get after birthing a baby without having that interference. So that's what we have to acknowledge in that aspect. If we look at it in terms of our emotional state, it might look like you're going to numb out, or you're going to not let yourself feel those emotions because it feels too hard and heavy. And that might look like, it can look like over-exercising. You choose to go to the gym instead of having a cry. It could look like, you know, using food to numb the emotions. It could look like scrolling. It could look like continuing to busy yourself so you don't actually have alone time. When you do that, you're taking yourself off that scale and you can't actually experience the pleasure. So to actually allow, again, the body to be here and experience the pleasure, we have to be grounded and we have to be in the body. So, you know, everything kind of ties back to that, being in your body and then experiencing the pleasure. And we have to acknowledge that sensuality and sexuality are not synonymous. So sexuality is obviously our relationship with our sexual experience, and sensuality is our relationship with our senses. And when we realize that we've become heavily desensitized, both sexually and in day-to-day life, no wonder we have, especially women, who cannot reconnect with themselves. So it's about bringing sensitivity into our body, emotionally and physically. And it's all intertwined. So when we can acknowledge our emotional body, when we can acknowledge our energetic body, when we can acknowledge our physical body and allow them to actually intertwine with each other, we have a system now that's more of an ecosystem as opposed to this space of discomfort that's so compartmentalized. So
that is so beautifully explained. I get like lost in the way that you speak. You're so calming. I'm like trying to listen. I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. If you could share one message with women who have forgotten what pleasure feels like, what would it be?
Oh, if I could share. I use analogies a lot because I feel like that's the only way I can like articulate what my brain is imagining. But it's kind of like, imagine if you grew up on McDonald's and you only ate McDonald's. You're just going to think that's normal and that, you know, yeah, you live a good life and you feel good. Until you have a complete detox and you start understanding, you know, nutrition and how your body functions, and then you actually start to get healthy and you realize there's another level of, you know, life to be lived. It's kind of the same with pleasure. You know, women only experience a capped level of pleasure depending on how deep they will go. That's how high they can go. And if you've only been exposed to a certain level of yourself or certain experiences, you're going to think that's it. And it's kind of like, you know, there are so many different orgasms that can be experienced. If you're only experiencing orgasms at this level and you think that's it because that's the only thing you've experienced, you don't know that there's anything else, you will be mind-blown when you have a mind-blowing orgasm. So the same thing with our pleasure, the more sensitive we can become. Imagine if we were told that we could, you know, I'm just going to keep on the theme of like sexuality, orgasm from a very soft, simple touch as opposed to like overstimulating touch.
Yes.
Then we will see how more accessible pleasure is in our body. So I can't even remember what your question was, sorry.
So if you could, I feel like you're answering it though, like if you could share one message to women who've forgotten what pleasure feels like, what would it be?
Yeah, it feels like truly, like honestly, I think the word that comes to me is safety. It feels like safety in the body. It feels like something that like becomes second nature to just like live in a state of pleasure. And it will shift and it will fluctuate and we will always move through challenges. But allowing yourself to, and pleasure for me, I think that's why I've truly had such a good week, because even though I wasn't in a position that I wanted to be at the beginning of this week, there were a lot of challenges that came up for me. I had to prioritize the things that brought me pleasure to then allow myself to be more open, and then the opportunities started to come in.
It.
Yeah.
Going back to orgasms.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
I think everything shifts like when you have a safe orgasm. And like it's literally what you were saying before. It's like you don't know what you don't know until you experience it.
Yeah.
And there is so much that, you know, like old me would be so cringe to be talking about orgasms on a podcast right now. But I think it needs to be spoken about because I didn't realize what I was missing out on.
Oh my gosh.
Until I experienced a safe orgasm.
Yeah.
And to completely be in a different world when you're in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's probably as far as I'll go with the orgasm side of things. But I think it is really important, that safety within intimacy.
Yeah.
So I love that you speak to that.
And that, and you know, and that will depend on like if it's with a partner who you're with, but also how connected you are to yourself. And even for women who are in relationships or who are, you know, intimate with anyone, it's like the more you can turn yourself on, the better the sex is going to be. Because if you do not feel turned on by yourself, you're going to be like, oh, you know, you might be overthinking it and you might feel a bit self-conscious or whatever, which then brings you out of your body. Therefore, you're not embodied. Therefore, you don't actually receive or experience the pleasure. So, you know, that self-connection is just like crucial in every aspect of life.
Well, if I go back to younger me as well, and I understand being young, you obviously have, well, I had a lot more insecurities. And it was always like how I looked or how I felt naked. And I never enjoyed it because I was trying to be someone that I thought I wasn't. Like, or like I had to look and feel a certain way, and I would show up completely different in the bedroom. To, you know, I wouldn't want the lights on, I wouldn't want my tummy out, I would want to wear a top. Like, so I feel like that just happened. I don't know, that's what I experienced as I was younger, and as I connected more with myself, I would like the moment that you like walk out of like the bathroom, whether you're in like sexy lingerie or you don't have anything on at all, like the energy shifts completely for them and for you, mainly for you.
And I think, you know, a lot of that comes back to that worthiness. It's like we feel like we have to earn that worthiness in order to receive the pleasure or in order to be loved in a particular way. But when we come back to understanding that our self-worth is our birthright and the way in which we show up is enough, then we can start to integrate that new level of self-trust.
I feel like I could talk to this topic, intimacy, for so long, but I'll kind of cap it there because I kind of, before we finish up on the podcast, I really wanted to touch about some of the modalities that you actually do, because I'm on Sunday doing a reading with you, which I'm so excited about.
Excited for.
And I really wanted to kind of, if you feel comfortable, to touch on that and like, what does a reading kind of, what am I in for on Sunday? And like, how did this come about? Like, I know you mentioned a bit at the start.
Yeah. So in Māori culture, we are very connected to spirituality and our intuition. And so it's something that I grew up understanding, but I also didn't only grow up in New Zealand. So I was also disconnected from like really what that looked like day to day. My nana passed away when I was pregnant with my first son. I was about 7 months pregnant and I was really close to her. She helped bring me up. And so that was a very hard loss. And I was like, she's not physically here, but I know she's spiritually here. And my intuition was very strong as a child. Like I would see things, hear things, but it was something that I feared because I didn't know what to do with that intuition. And it's kind of like you know, media kind of throws it out of proportion. And so we start to fear our intuition. And I understood, I went to go get a reading. It was my first reading that I'd ever gotten at a spiritual fair in New Zealand. And this lady basically told me like, oh, your nana's recently passed away. And I was like, yes. And she's like, oh, yeah. And she's like, oh, so she's telling you this, this, and this. And it all like made sense. And I was like, oh, okay, this is legit. And she was like, oh, yeah, so your nana is also saying like, you are going to tap into this work. This is part of your purpose. And I was like, nah. Not me. And I was like, I don't get it. And then, you know, a couple of years later, it's like I just slowly started to listen, and like my dreams are a big portal of messages for me. So I often connect to myself in the dream realm, whether I set an intention before I go to sleep, or sometimes the dreams will just drop in and I'm like, okay, that was definitely a message I needed to hear. And I just started to play. I learned how to remove the fear. I hired a mentor, Jessica Reed. She's a Kiwi chick who lives here as well, so beautiful. And yeah, I started to learn ways in which I could feel safe. It was about feeling safe with my intuition and not fearing it. And then the more I did it, I realized, oh, what is coming through is actually making sense. I know I'm not logically articulating everything. It's just like I'm in this like channel flow state and it's coming through me. And through that, in recent years especially, I went back to New Zealand just a couple of weeks ago. And so that reconnection to where I'm from and my tupuna, my ancestors, that's what helped me feel far more connected in my intuition as well, as going back to my roots and understanding how ancestrally our people would use intuition as a part of day-to-day life. So once again, sorry, I forgot the question, but
forgot my own question,
you know,
too.
essentially, that was how I had started to reconnect to my intuition. And then with the readings, it's a 1 hour Zoom chat.
Yeah.
And I do have tools. I use cards and things like that, but often they are like the little doorway that gets to open. And then once they're kind of there, they initiate whatever is meant to come through. So it's never something that I can like pre-plan. I don't always know exactly, obviously, what's going to come through. The more specific my clients are with their intentions as to why they're booking, the more specific the messages are going to be. Wow. You know, so it's really important. Like intentionality is everything. And when I have clients who book in who are super clear, they get the most out of the readings because, you know, they are opening themselves up to what is here for them.
Yeah. So I need to get clear on what
Yeah,
I want to I'm like, I was actually thinking that the other day. I was like, do I talk about business? Do I talk about my relationship? I was like, what do I dive into? But I feel
Well,
like,
often they're all connected as well. So
really?
it's like, so you can actually, you can have your intention, have your questions,
Yes, yeah.
but it's like, well, your business will be impacted by your relationship, and your relationship will be impacted by your self-connection. And that might be, so there's like all these different facets of ourselves that are, it's like a domino effect.
I love that. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. I think as well, once I kind of dived into the work that you did, like I jumped on your
Stand
website.
store,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. And I think sometimes I feel like it's spoken about as like too many options can be too much, but I loved that you had so many different options that still really tied back to a particular meaning.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of our podcast, I love to ask all of our, I was going to say listeners, all of our guests. So what does empowered woman mean to you today?
It looks like stepping into the truest version of ourselves, which requires intent, embodiment, and self-belief, even when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I love it. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for being so open today. You spoke so beautifully. I was completely like in my own little bubble listening to you, and I think so many amazing people, not just women, can like learn from everything that you've just expressed, and you teach really, really beautifully. So thank you.
Thank you.
If people want to find you, what is your, like, where's your go-to, your social media page?
My Instagram would be the place where I post the most, which is Renee_Harata, so Harata. And then on there I have the link to my stand store where all my services are available as well.
Amazing. Well, you'd be silly not to. Go and check it out. And thank you again, Renee, and I'm super excited for Sunday.
Oh, thank you.